At this time, I'm going to ask Zach Hayes, the son of Dillon coaching legend Jackie Hayes, to introduce our guest speaker today. Zach Hayes, it's your show.
Thank you, Billy. All right, that thing ain't working. Good afternoon. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Coach Joe Moglia. Coach Moglia is a graduate of Fordham University, where he graduated with a degree in economics. After graduating, he began his coaching career in Delaware, where he turned 2 high school programs around. With great success, Coach was able to move on to the college ranks, where he won 2 Ivy League championships as a defense coordinator at Dartmouth and set defensive and special team records at Lafayette. After 16 successful years of coaching, he decided it was time for a change. Coach entered the business world, where for 17 years he worked for Merrill Lynch as a member of the executive committee. Through his noticeable hard work with Merrill Lynch, Coach earned the right to be the CEO of TD Ameritrade, where he worked for 7 years. Within his 7 years, he grew client assets from $24 billion to $300 billion and increased the market cap from $700 million to $12 billion. In 2008, Coach decided it was time to step down from CEO and become the chairman of the board for TD Ameritrade. This was widely done for his love of football, something he could not live without. For the next few years, Coach was the executive advisor to the head coach at the University in Nebraska, with hopes of one day becoming a college head coach. In 2011, he had the opportunity of being the head coach of the UFL Omaha Nighthawks. After 1 year with the Nighthawks, Coach Moglia was given the opportunity that he waited on throughout his whole life, to be a head college football coach. On December 19, 2011, Coach Moglia was named the head coach of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, where he is entering his 3rd season. Throughout his time at Coastal, he has led the Chanticleers to a share of 2 Big South championships and has led the Chants to 2 playoff appearances in his first 2 seasons. Coach also won the school's first NCAA playoff game in 2012 by defeating Bethune-Cookman. Not only does Coach know how to successfully coach football and work in the business world, he is also a writer. Coach is the only person to publish books on both football and investing. But it doesn't stop there. When it comes to football, Coach is not only great at teaching his players about the game, but he is also great at teaching his players and coaches about the game of life. He gives them one rule, and that one rule is to be a man. Being a man is not about being big and strong, but doing the right thing and making the people around you proud. It is also about being able to face adversity and not backing down to anything that is put in front of you. Would you please help me in welcome the head coach of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, Coach Joe Moglia.
Whoops. I'm not sure of that. Can you all hear me in the corner? Okay. First of all, Billy and Zach, thank you very, very much for the introduction. I very much appreciate that. What I wanted to do, I want to begin with a story. How many of you know who Jerry Colangelo is? Just kind of raise your hand. Most of you don't. If I asked you today, who's the most popular executive in the history of business sports, probably most of you say Mark Cuban, because he's on television a lot, etc. So far, he made his money in the technology business, and he's involved with basketball. Let me explain what Colangelo did. Colangelo was the CEO and the founder of the Phoenix Suns, and he played in an NBA championship. He was also the CEO of the Arizona Diamondbacks, and he beat the Yankees for the World Series. He's also the guy that's in charge of USA Basketball. He's the guy that hired Krzyzewski to coach a USA Basketball team. So this guy, he grew up in Indiana. This guy has won an NBA championship as the CEO. He has won a World Series against the Yankees, and he's won 3 gold medals. So with my background, this is about 7 or 8 years ago, so with my background in sports, the National Italian American Foundation has a big gala event, 3,000 people, black tie event in Washington. And he was going to be there, and there was a small event the night before that I was invited to, and I wanted to go because Jerry was going to be there, and I just wanted to meet the guy. So I come down, and it's the night before, and I walk into the room, and somebody taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "Joe, it's Jerry Colangelo." And I was like, it was a big deal for me. So we had a chance to chat for a little while. I mentioned there's about 100 people there. There was one reserved table. And he said, "Joe, why don't you sit with me at my table? There's one reserved one that's in the front." So I go walk up to the front, and who's sitting at the table? Tommy Lasorda. Now, Tommy Lasorda is probably the single greatest figure in the history of baseball. You might argue that a little bit. He's already in the Hall of Fame. But this guy has accomplished an awful lot in baseball. So I had the good fortune to be with Jerry and Tommy like the entire weekend. And Tommy, if you get to know him, I mean, the guy is funny. The guy is funny. He's Italian, he's funny. Now, the reason why I point out the Italian thing is because I have been told that this little story I'm going to tell you is politically incorrect. So remember, this was at the National Italian-American Foundation. By the way, my father was born in Italy. By the way, I'm part Italian. It happens to be something about an Italian, but it's Tommy Lasorda's story anyway. Okay, you mind if I share this with you guys? Okay, so there are two generals, and they're getting ready for battle. And it's the night before. There's a German general and an Italian general. And they finish all the preparation, and the German general turns around to one of his aides, and he says, "Hans, bring me my red coat." And the Italian general kind of looks a little puzzled, and he says, "Hey, Generale, me no understand. Why are you asking for a red coat?" "Because tomorrow, if I get shot in battle, the red of my coat will camouflage my blood, and I will continue to be a source of inspiration to my men." So the Italian general thought about it for a couple minutes. He says, "That's a good idea." And he turns around to his aide, and he goes, "Hey, Luigi, go get him my brown pants." Okay. Okay, so now that we're on a roll here, so there's a chicken, a duck, and a robot walk into a bar. I'm just kidding. What I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of just share a little bit, not the resume stuff. I want to share a little bit about my background. Billy shared his. I just want to share the beginning of it. I already mentioned my dad was born in Italy. He came to this country when he was 11. My father never finished 8th grade. My mother was born in Ireland. She came to this country to marry my dad. She never finished high school. I lived in the Dyckman Street section of New York City. It's a gang area. I was part of a gang from the time I was about 10. The 7 of us, I was the oldest of 5 kids, the 7 of us lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. 2 of my very, very best friends, in grammar school, I was with these guys every day, died in high school. One died of a drug overdose. The other was killed by the police when he was robbing a liquor store. Had I not been playing high school football, I would have been with the guy that was robbing the liquor store. And the 2 things that I think kind of helped me at the time was, 1, I had the chance to play sports. 2, I mentioned my father never finished 8th grade. My father sold bananas and apples in the Bronx his entire life. He worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, selling bananas and apples. And when I wasn't playing ball, I was expected to be with him in the fruit store. So a story I've just started to share over the span of the last couple of years. I'm not proud of this, but this is something that happened to me in my life, and I'm actually using it. I'm telling the story and talking about it a little bit more now, especially since I've gotten back to football. So I'm playing football and baseball in high school, and I expect to play both in college. Instead, my girlfriend gets pregnant. My dad sits down with me, and his advice is, "Son, I appreciate and respect the fact that you want to take care of Kathy and your baby, your new baby, but your number 1 priority is you got to support your family. That's your responsibility. You clearly have to give up sports, and you clearly should not go to college. You should work with me full-time in the fruit store." Now, this is my father, probably the toughest time of my life. His advice to me is don't go to college. And one of the things that I learned from kind of watching him was he didn't particularly love his job. It's pretty important to be able to love what you do. And my dad was kind of never particularly happy. The glass was always half empty. It was always kind of somebody else's fault. And I remember thinking I needed to do something in my life that I enjoyed. Otherwise, I didn't want to be miserable. And I said, "Dad, I love you, and I know how important what you're saying is, and I know I got to give up sports, but I think I got to go to college." So I wound up going to Fordham University in the Bronx. Now, my freshman year, I am now a husband and a father. I have 100% of the expense of all my education, and I'm supporting my wife and child. I am driving a New York City taxi cab. I am driving a truck for the post office, and I'm working my dad's store. You're going to find this a shock, but that wasn't the most fun a freshman has ever had in the history of freshmen in college. And I remember the one thing that I was missing was sports were gone. So I was able to get a high school coaching job at the school that I had gone to. So in the next 3 years, I am supporting my way. I'm coaching high school football during the season, and I'm working in my dad's store in the off season. I'm majoring in economics. I think I want to go to Wall Street. But I really, really loved the coaching. I really, really loved it. And I decided that if I could get my own head high school football job upon graduating, I'd pursue a career in coaching. If not, I'd try to go to Wall Street. Well, at 22, I became the youngest head football coach in the history of the state of Delaware. Now, I'm 22. I had never been more than 15 miles outside of New York City. I thought Delaware was the deep South. I thought Delaware and South Carolina were right next to each other. And I remember for me to leave home, leave the security of home, leave where I grew up, there had to be more to it than just the football. So I remember going down and writing down my thoughts. I wrote about this a lot. And the first time I'm meeting with our team, you know, same as you guys. My guys were 18. The varsity was 18, 17, 16, 15 maybe. I'm 22. And I said, guys, we're going to work hard. We're going to win championships. We're going to do all those things. But it's more than that. It's got to be more than that. And I told them about what I had just gone through in my life. I'm just 3, 4 years older than they are. Here's what happened to me when I was a senior, when I was in your shoes. So our program's got to be more than just about winning football. It's got to be about figuring out a way to grow up. Now, this has nothing to do with being a man, but we're all boys in our football program. So we talked about helping a boy become a man. It's the exact same principle for a girl to become a woman, and it's exactly the same principles that great leaders are made out of. Now, over the span of the next 4 decades, if I had 2 decades in football and 2 decades in Wall Street, if there was one thing I wanted to come away with, it was that same principle that our guys put together back 40 years ago. And that principle is you stand on your own 2 feet and you accept responsibility for yourself, period. Too often in life, especially athletes, guys, too often in life we feel we're somewhat entitled. Someone will take care of things for us. That especially happens with athletes. But the reality is, at the end of the day, it is your responsibility. No matter what you're doing in life, no matter what's going on, whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's home, whether it's family, whether it's education, you stand on your own 2 feet and you take responsibility for yourself. That is the most significant, critically important thing that I think I have learned over the span of the last 4 decades. So at Coastal Carolina, for example, we begin with, if we're recruiting somebody, this is what we're talking about. We begin with, we say we have a mission. And it says nothing about winning. Now, we got to compete at the national level. If we don't compete at the national level, I'm going to lose my job. That's what football is about. But we don't talk about that. We say we have a mission. The mission is to put a team on the field that all Coastal is going to be proud of. And when we explain that, we know that means we got to win. But there's much more to it than that. That means you never, ever take the field as a Coastal football player and not give it your very, very best shot. You give it everything you've got. That's what makes your community, your school, your family proud. And it's about, by the way, we don't have any rules. The NCAA has a lot of rules. Our university has rules. We have to abide by those, but we have no rules in our football program, none. But we have one standard. You stand on your own 2 feet, you accept responsibility for yourself. That's true for the coaches, true of everybody in operations, and it's true of every one of our players. And we talk to our recruits, we say, this is not just in football. We talk about that a little bit. We say this is in the classroom. And why is the classroom important? Is because you're laying a foundation upon which to build a career later on. And later on, you're going to have significant responsibilities with regards to family, career path, etc. Your behavior. You're supposed to be a leader. On and off campus, your behavior is something you got to take responsibility for. At the end of the day, every one of our guys, every one of our athletes in here is somebody's son, somebody's brother. You will always have a responsibility to your family. Live up to that responsibility. And there's another one, as you get a little wiser and you take responsibility for yourself, your judgment is critically important. Today, everybody's connected, everybody's Twitter, and everybody's on Facebook. Guys, pay attention to this because this is a critical point. You stand on your own 2 feet, you take responsibility for yourself. Once you put something out on the web, once it's out there, it is out there forever. Now, when we're recruiting our guys, we're going to go and we're going to look at what's out there on them. When we're hiring people at Ameritrade, we're going to look at what's out there on them. The NFL will look at what's out there on them. And some people say, well, I didn't know. I was just a kid. But guess what? That's what you say when you're 15. Then all of a sudden you're saying the same thing at 19. Then all of a sudden you're saying the same thing at 25. You know what? Because you're not standing on your own 2 feet and taking responsibility for yourself. So that's really what it is about. And it affects all the different areas of your life. Now, if you can buy into that a little bit, work with me on it, buy into that a little bit, I think there are 2 fundamental principles that make this work, The first one is courage. And I would define courage as having the guts to do what you believe is right, regardless of what's going on around you, regardless of what happens to you near term. You have the guts to do what you believe is right. Now, I'm focused pretty much on the guys that are being honored today, but there's some application here for everybody in the room. Okay, so you think about the pressure that are on you as a student athlete. You know, you've got the balance you've got to be able to keep between academics and athletics, what you need to do in the off season. Your responsibilities at home, the responsibilities you have as a big brother, or maybe even as a little brother, certainly as a son. What are your responsibilities when you start to get a lot of peer pressure to have you do something that you know is the wrong thing to do? How do you handle that? What are your responsibilities with regards to your girlfriends? What are your responsibilities with regards to drugs? What are your responsibilities with regards to with regards to alcohol? Every one of those things is part of your responsibility. Now, do you have the guts enough to do what you believe is right when nobody's there watching? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. But what a man, by the way, doesn't always get that right. But a man tries to get it right. A man tries to get that right. It's something worth thinking about. It is very much a difference between a man and a boy, a girl and a woman, or a leader and a great leader. Now, we live in what we believe is, without question, I have no doubt that everybody in this room is going to agree with me, we live in the greatest country in the world. Okay, give me an amen to that one. All right. But there are hundreds of thousands of people that are as passionate, with unlimited funding and finances behind them, that believe what we do is evil, and they will not hesitate to give up their lives to take away our freedom. That's what's going on that's what happened on 9/11. It's not just a matter of being able to fly it into a building and doing something symbolic. There are truly, truly, truly hundreds of thousands of people in the world that believe what we're doing is evil, and they will actually be rewarded. Their families will actually be rewarded in the afterlife for taking away the way we live. And that's where the role of the military winds up coming in. And you know what it is? A soldier dies literally every day. Every day, a soldier, one of our soldiers, dies defending our country. And there have been written letters very, very similar to this one that have been written over the span of the last couple of centuries by moms to the President of the United States that begin with, Mr. President, why did my son have to die at Gettysburg? Mr. President, why did my son have to die in Normandy Beach? Mr. President, why did my son have to die in Vietnam or Korea or in the Middle East or in Afghanistan or wherever it may be? Why did my son have to die? And every answer is the same. So we can live in peace and so we can live in freedom. And you ask sometimes, those people that represent us and represent our country, they are fighting in the Middle East today so we can play or teach or coach football. So we've got the opportunity to do that. And when we say to them, they said, you're willing to put on your life, you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice and put your life on the line for us. What is it we can do in return? And the answer is almost always the same. One, appreciate what you have. Appreciate the freedom you have. Appreciate your family. Appreciate that you have the right to be able to play football. And two, with the freedom comes a responsibility. Stand on your own 2 feet and take responsibility for yourself. And my life will not have been lived in vain. The second fundamental principle, that's one of the most powerful principles I think that exist in humankind, it's love. Now, when I've talked about love in the past, I've actually heard people kind of giggle. And we're talking about the power of love here. When we're talking about the power of love, I want to define this a little bit. Love is the commitment to the well-being of others. Billy talked about this a little while ago. It's the commitment to the well-being of others. And the power to committing to the well-being of others is actually absolutely extraordinary. And not everybody gets it. Parents get it. Most coaches get it. Great leaders get it. A boy really working hard to become a man or a girl really working hard to become a woman, they get it. They get it. Because it's not so much about themselves, it's about others. So I want to ask the guys in the room, I guess the guys that are on it today, average age 15, 16, 17, so let me make believe the average age of the room is 16 years old. And I'm asking you to think about this. I want you to answer this. You're 16 years old. Think back to when you were 12. Today, Same person, same human being. Are you a lot sharper today? Are you a lot wiser today? Are you more experienced today than what you were when you were 12? All right. Put your role in your parents' place for a second. There are times when we have conflicts at home. There are times we have conflicts with our parents. I want to put that in perspective for you. Number one, when your parents are pushing you or when they're on you, there's 3 reasons for that. And understand the reasons. It's not about yourself. It's about somebody else. Understand what the 3 reasons are. First, because they love you more than anybody else loves you in the world. Period. When Billy had the guys get up and give a hug to their families, that's only a part of it. I mean, that was warm and that was lovely and that was great. But when there's a little bit of tension in the house, you feel you kind of be picked on, recognize that the person you're dealing with loves you more than anybody else in the world does. Number 2, for the same reason why you were a lot sharper at 16 than what you were at 12, guess what? Your parents had decades away from when they were 16. They've been there, they've done that. They get it. They had the same issues with your peers. They had the same issues with their girlfriends, boyfriends. They had the same issues with alcohol. They had the same issues. The same pressures that you have, they had. You need to understand they have been there and done that. And they have an experience you need to understand, or at least, at the very, very least, respect. And number 3, and you really got to get this piece, it's their job. That's their job. To stand on their own 2 feet and take responsibility for their children. And all they want is for you to be happy in life. And all they want is for that. But what they're doing is preparing you for when you go out on the road and you got to go and make decisions when they are not around. And when you're on your own, how you are later on in life has a lot to do with the decisions you're making today. The power of love. And you come back and it's easy to talk about in athletics, right? It's easy to talk about the team, the love of a team, this, that, etc. The sacrifice one makes for the good of the team. We all understand that. It's actually easy to understand. I want to get back to the family thing because it's far more powerful. And it's got impacts on everything else that you do. And I want to share 2 stories that happened to me that I want to share with you, and I think you'll understand what the impact is. I'm 13 years old. I told you where I grew up. I was a gang kid. I think I'm a badass. My father and mother have a meeting with the family, and they say that this weekend Mom's going to go in the hospital, but no big deal. I didn't think too much about that. Now, I told you, 7 of us are living in 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It wasn't like there's a whole lot of privacy in this place. So I noticed my father is on his knees by his bed, and I noticed he's crying. Now, my dad died of Alzheimer's about 5 years ago. He died in his 80s. This is the only time in my life I ever saw my father cry. And I went to him and I asked him, Dad, what is it? And he said, I'm worried about Mommy. And I remember going to bed that night, and I described my dad a little bit earlier, kind of a little bit in a bad mood all the time. My mom was the exact opposite. She could not have been more loving, she never not had a smile on her face. The glass for her was always half full. She came from Ireland when she was 25 to marry this Italian immigrant. Nobody in her family could afford to come over. When she got married, she was the only person in the church that she knew other than having met my father's family. And she lived for her 5 children. And I realized for my dad to feel the way he did, there was a chance my mom wasn't going to make it. And I lay there all night, actually thinking my mom might die. And me, Mr. Tough Guy, Mr. Badass, I had never told my mother I loved her. And I remember praying that night. I said, God, just please, if you bring Mom home, I said, promise I'll never let that happen. He did bring her home, and I'd never let that happen. And I can remember later on, even as a kid, some guys get a little embarrassed to be with their parents or to show affection someplace else. I got to the point where I was proud to do that because when I said something, I did something like that, or I told my mom I cared about her, I could just see whatever was in, whatever worry was on her face just went away. That was how a little bit of the love got repaid. Then fast forward a little bit. I just moved from New York City to Omaha, Nebraska. This is 2001. I'm the CEO of TD Ameritrade. My responsibility is to take care of that firm. And I'm watching 2011 happen. I'm watching the planes flying into the World Trade Center. One other piece of this. Merrill Lynch, where I worked for 17 years, is 100 yards. 100 yards. It's like from one end of the room to the other from the World Trade Center. The apartment that I lived in while I was working there, 150 yards to the World Trade Center. By then, 3 of my kids had moved to Brooklyn. 2 of them worked at Merrill Lynch. So all this is going on. I go in that day, we go into emergency mode. What we were responsible for was the physical well-being of our employees and the protection of our clients' assets. I couldn't, New York, this is my home. This is all going on, but I couldn't do much about it. And I get a call later on that morning from my daughter, Kim. She was one of the 3 kids that didn't work at Merrill Lynch. She said, Dad, I had a chance to talk to both Kevin and Kara, and both of them are okay. And I said, Kim, thanks so much for giving me that call. Do your best to try to keep me in the loop. She calls me about 3 hours later, and she says, Dad, I just got off the phone with Kara. They've evacuated the building. Everybody is in Jersey City. Kara is a little stressed. She's a little stressed, but she's okay. Dad, the last time anybody saw Kevin, he was on his way over to the site to see if he could help out. Dad, have you heard from Kevin? Now, by this time, I had seen the towers collapse, not knowing that my son had gone over there. And it was a rough day. It was a rough day. I'm sharing one thing that happened to you in my 50s and one thing that happened to you when I was 13. Because of what happened to me when I was 13, the sense of peace that I had that day, I mean, it was a heartache, but the sense of peace I had that day, that I had realized that there was a pretty good probability that I had lost my son. But if that were the case, there was nothing that I had to tell him that I hadn't already told him. He knew I loved him. He knew I said, this is about you standing on your own 2 feet and accepting responsibility for yourself. He understood those things. Around 6 o'clock that night, I get a call. I said, Dad, this is Kevin. It's the power of love has such an incredible influence on anything that we do. You see it and you feel it right away when it comes to your family. At least that's how it always began for me. But at the end of the day, when you're interacting with somebody, you treat them with dignity and respect. If there's somebody that you're playing with or you're working with, you care about the best interests of others. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. And the thing that it does the most, it makes you feel good about yourself. And if you feel good about yourself, that's the #1 ingredient to being happier down the road. And as I began the beginning of this talk, that's what all of us want for all of you guys. So, my message is, you stand on your own 2 feet, you accept responsibility for yourself, you work hard to have the guts to do what you believe is right, and you recognize what the power of love is. And you never, ever, ever forget the role that your family has in your life. It was an honor for me to be here today. Congratulations to all of you that are being honored, and thanks so much for having me.